Hello, everybody, and warmly welcome to the Inderes Investor Day. We are from Purmo, and we're proud of what we do. And we're going to talk about sustainable indoor climate comfort solutions. My name is John Peter Leesi, and I have the privilege of being the CEO for Purmo Group. Let's look at the company in a snapshot. This is a summary of who we are and what we do. What you can see to the left is that we're listed on Nasdaq Helsinki. We've been that for over a year now. We have a long and rich history reaching back to the early 1950s. We employ 3,400 people, and we are a leader in what we do. We are a leader in radiators, but we are a top 4 player also when it comes to underfloor heating and cooling. We are roughly 50% of what we do is radiators. The other 50% is then indoor climate systems, which include underfloor heating and cooling. To the right, you can see a map of predominantly Europe. So most of our activities are in Europe, but we also operate in China, we operate in North America, as well as in Brazil. This is then one of our divisions called the Indoor Climate Systems Division. These people do underfloor cooling and heating solutions, embedded systems, things that we don't necessarily see with our eyes, right? And you can see that this is a business that has over the last 4 years grown with 14% per year in top line, in net sales, but even more so when it comes to profitability in terms of adjusted EBITDA, which has grown over the last 4 years with 33% per annum. This is important to us because this is an area where Purmo wants to grow. To the right, you can see photos of our beautiful products. To the top, you see underfloor heating pipe, clips, and installation. If you move down, you can see various products like convectors, you can see air conditioning and heat pump, you can see ventilation units, you can see various types of pipes and fittings, thermostatic valves, and last but not least, smart controls as well. So this is what this business does, and usually puts this together in a beautiful solution that is being then supplied to the installers around the world. Let's look at the radiator division. This is our history. This is where it once started, in the village of Purmo, somewhere in Finland. And what you can see here is a business that has less of growth due to the fact that it's an older product range, but still extremely important. Radiators you can see around all our buildings, in homes, in offices, etc., because they are so efficient as heat emitters. This is a business where we are the leader in the world. To the right here, you can see some beautiful pictures of the products. Panel radiators, designer radiators, low water temperature radiators, towel warmers, and various types of decorative radiators as well. The operating environment. So how are the markets that we work in? So this is a summary of our addressable market in Europe. You can see it adds up in the year of 2023, which is a forecast, to around 10.5 billion euros. This is what we address. From the top, you can see it's about fixed electrical heating, it's radiant heating and cooling, which is the embedded systems, the underfloor stuff that doesn't always meet the eye. Then you have the hydronic radiators we just looked at. And finally, the big orange blob here is actually heat pumps, hydronic heat pumps. And you can see that these businesses and these markets are growing, and of course, heat pumps stand out to grow with 21%. The way Purmo taps into this opportunity is that we combine these products into a solution. And if we try to understand how much of this 10.5 billion euro market is an addressable solutions market, we have a proxy here. Somewhere around 3 billion euros in Europe is the addressable market for solutions. And this is a market that we actually expect will grow with more than 6% per annum. This is our playground. This is where we will grow, and this is where we will expand in solutions for residential heating and cooling. Let's look at the reasons for you, me, all of us to invest in Purmo Group. We put together 7 points here, and we're going to show some more detail in a few of them. But let me hit them sweet and hard, one by one, but shortly. The first one, we're at the center of the global sustainability journey. The planet drives every agenda. There is nowhere to hide anymore, and we're at the middle of this. Point number 2, we take a lot of pride in having the broadest offering of products that we bring into these solutions. That is our pride, and that is our competitive advantage. Point number 3 is that we have a family of brands that are incredibly strong. Point number 4, we have long-standing relationships with customers. Customers being wholesalers, technical wholesalers, and customers being installers. And these are not like new relationships. They're long, decade-long, strong relationships. Point number 5, we believe we have an inspiring purpose in life and a clear strategy underpinning it. Point number 6, we have a strong financial track record. And last but not least again, we have 3,400 inspired, skilled, competent, and hungry employees and colleagues. Let's look at them, a few of them, one by one. You know, an unbelievable fact is that 17% of energy consumption in Europe, 17% of every energy consumption, every hour, every minute, every week, every day, is to heat and cool our homes. 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions, or more specifically, the CO2 emissions, come from buildings in Europe today. There are targets to reduce this, and we're contributing to this. The fact is, however, a bit brutal. Europe is lagging, and we're not going to meet our climate goals until, for 2030 and 2050. So we need to accelerate the speed. Europe and all European nations need to accelerate the speed in the green transition, and we're there to contribute to this. And one of the drivers and the supporting drivers for this transition is the European Union's Green Deal, which is an additional 250 billion euros yearly on top of the national investments we see here. So if you want to play in one field today that is so exciting, it's the green transition, and it is how to heat and cool our homes in a more efficient way. And that inspires us a lot. Let's look at this broadest offering. This is a home. The picture you see to the right is a normal home anywhere in Europe, or actually in the world, right? We take a lot of pride again in that to the left you can see the various components in a solution that goes into the home for heating and cooling. At the very top you see the emission, the heating and cooling emission, the actual physical equipment where thermal energy is emitted. You have flow control that makes sure that the hydronic and the thermal energy is actually moved to these emitters. You have comfort control, which is the user interface for you and me to be able to set temperatures and comfort levels. There is energy distribution, which is the piping work and the valves and so on to make sure you get the right stuff to the right place at the right time. Then you have energy generation, which is a heat pump, which is a gas boiler, which is an oil boiler, which is something. And today we only work with air-to-water heat pumps. And then you have ventilation, energy recovery ventilation. So Purmo today provides in its solutions all these products. This is our strategy. Point number 5, a clear and inspirational strategy. At the very top, you see the vision and the mission. Every human being on this planet should have the right to enjoy the perfect climate, but it doesn't have to cost the planet's climate. Simple as that. Our mission is to be the leader in sustainable indoor climate comfort solutions, and that is rated by our customers, not through our own thinking. So that's where we want to go. That's the direction of travel. That is our North Star. To be able to live up to that, we have defined 3 growth strategic themes. The one in the middle says smart products. Products are not only a product in isolation, it's a product that is beautiful to look at because it's often in the middle of our homes. It is a product that is sustainable, that can be recycled, and often fossil-free in its production. It's also a product that is intelligent because it must be connected to a bigger solution, which moves us to the left to solution selling. Our purpose in life is to bring beautiful products together in an even more beautiful solution that generates 2 levels of value. Ease of installation for the installers, and number 2, energy efficiency for the end user. And in addition to that, we've defined a number of growth markets where we will able to explore and exploit above average growth going forward. Supporting these strategic themes at the very bottom is an obsession around operational excellence, and above anything else, our people and our culture. If we look at the financial track record for Purmo Group, these are the headline numbers. We have a turnover of around 904 million euros as of last year, 2022, and we delivered a profitability or a profit of 93 million euros. And you can see that we've been growing over the last 3 years. And our business is resilient to the economic cycles around the world, and we've always been able to deliver good profitability and good cash conversion in terms of cash flows. There is a specific program that we've been launching, and we've announced externally to the stock market as well, is something we call Accelerate PG. It's a strategy acceleration program, and it was for us a way to additionally improve, sustainably and permanently change the level of earnings for the company. And that was important for us to be able to fund the journey to pursue this strategy and somehow getting a license to grow. And this program then includes a number of things. So we have earlier run a program called PG Up, which was successfully run, where we targeted somewhere around 16 to 18 million, and at the end we actually achieved 20 million in earnings improvement. And now we then, on the spirit and with that experience, we've launched this new program called Accelerate PG, and it looks like the following. The program targets 40 million permanent sustainable earnings uplift by the year 2024, measured as run rate EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And already by the end of 2023, this year, we will have achieved a 20 million improvement in adjusted EBITDA in terms of run rate. And you can see we work across many levers to generate this, including footprint optimization, looking at our overhead and our organizational structures, becoming more capable in pricing, and also working with sourcing programs. When it comes to sustainability, we've taken a lot of pride in already now. You've heard about the energy efficiency of our systems and what we're trying to do. But as all other companies, we also need to make sure that we internally are as sustainable as ever possible. So we have something that we called Complete Care, which is our sustainability strategy. And you can see that we work across 4 focus areas. One is around production. One is around our solutions that we bring to the customers. One is around our people. And the 4th one is around our communities. And in these areas, we have made a number of commitments. We've actually shown them to the right. We won't go through them, all of them. But in terms of recent achievements, these are things that we've done kind of very recently. So we have committed to what is called then science-based targets to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. So we have committed to this. We have now set the targets, and these targets are now being validated by third party here in the beginning of 2023. We have also achieved our first environmental product declarations given to 2 different products here. And then finally, we have also recently here joined the United Nations Global Compact. These are emblematic pieces of things that we have done in line with our sustainability strategy. This is the very example of, if it's something we want you to remember in terms of what we try to do, in terms of solutions, and our North Star and our direction of travel. This is a typical home in Europe. It's a twin apartment building. This one happens to be in Dovadola in Italy, in Emilia-Romagna. And the starting point you see to the left, which is a poor starting point, where the energy consumption for heating and cooling this home is 307 kilowatt hours per square meter per year, okay? That's the starting point. It's a bad starting point because that's not energy efficient at all. It is energy labeled as G, golf, right? What we have done then is that we have then implemented a new heating and cooling system based on solar panels. We have an air-to-water heat pump that we call Mirai. We have actually put in a condensing gas boiler as a backup for power, for peak hour needs. And there is also an HydroKit hot water system. In one of the apartments, we put underfloor heating and cooling. In the other apartment, we have put radiators, right? This building has then also been provided new insulation, new window, and new doors, actually. So what you see happening here is that with this bigger installation, including our equipment, we don't do insulation, windows, and doors, but including our equipment, which are equally important to insulation, doors, and windows, you can see how the energy label is jumping up to A3, which is then corresponding to 35 or 36 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. This is what we do in our projects across Europe in actually making Europe's homes more sustainable. This is our dream. This is our North Star. This is what we do. We have long-term financial targets, and let us just repeat them to you. We want to grow our business above the organic growth of the market, but including notable M&A. So there is a growth target. In terms of profitability or profit margins, we want adjusted EBITDA to exceed 15%. When it comes to leverage, the amount of debt we have in relation to our earnings, we shall not exceed 3.0. There will, however, be times, for good reasons, where it will pop over 3, but generally we will stay below 3. And in terms of dividends, sharing our profits with our shareholders, our policy is either in terms of dividend or capital as a dividend, more than 40%, at least 40% of our annual net profit we should pay in dividends. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for taking the time to listen to Purmo Group. We are proud of what we do, we care. We are courageous, we are ambitious, and we want to make changes that matter. Thank you.